Imagine coming home one night to find scattered human body parts on your bathroom floor. Justin Barnett was only 23 years old when he vanished in 1995. It was June the 3rd and he was living in Birmingham, Alabama with his ex-girlfriend Sheila Horton. Now Justin had plans to go to a party that night and was due to meet a new girl there. That evening he borrowed his ex Sheila's car and went out to meet some friends for a drink beforehand. After enjoying the drinks, he told his friends that he was off to meet a girl and that he would be back at some point later. However, he never returned. His friends tried to get in contact with him and see where he was, but they couldn't reach him, so they just presumed maybe he's gone home to sleep. When Justin's ex Sheila got back to the house as well at 2 a.m, she noticed he wasn't home. She was a little bit concerned but figured maybe he would be back in the morning. The day after, when he failed to come back home, he was reported missing to police. It would be days later that a worrying discovery was made. Sheila's car was found in Lakeview with no sign of Justin. However, this was particularly suspicious because police had actually searched the area where they did find the car previously and the car hadn't been there. It was an agonizing 2 decades before any news. It was actually January 2015 and a man with a guilty conscience showed up to a police station to make a statement. He was called Jonathan Abney and he was only 18 years old at the time of Justin's disappearance. He had some news that would stun investigators. He'd been living with his older sister Trisha and her boyfriend Jeff Martin at the time of Justin's vanishing. On the night of the 3rd of June 1995, he came home to a scene like that out of a horror film. Dismembered body parts lay all over the bathroom floor and the limbs belonged to Justin. Jonathan had actually met Justin just once previously when he was buying substances. Jonathan told officers that his sister had convinced him to go out that night so she and Justin could have some alone time. However, she had very sinister plans for the evening. Her and her partner planned to rob Justin, but this would go horribly wrong. They ended up stabbing Justin to death and Jonathan had helped the pair get rid of Justin's body. Jonathan then took Sheila's car to the place where police had found it. Now Trisha was arrested and Jeff actually ended his own life shortly after. Trisha was given life in prison without parole and Jonathan was actually given immunity for his confession and cooperation.
After 73 years, the Somerton Man has finally been identified. This was one of Australia's most famous unsolved mysteries. Hi, I'm Meg. I cover true crime. Let's get into this super mysterious case. November 30th, 1948, the body of a man is found on Somerton Beach, Adelaide. When police got there, there was no form of identification on the man at all. Here is some information about him. He was clean shaven, wearing a suit, but all of his clothing tags had been removed. He had an unused train ticket on him that was meant to go to a separate beach. He also had cigarettes and a pack of juicy fruit. He was thought to be 40 to 50 years old. He had some genetic abnormalities, one of them being with his teeth. This abnormality was only shown in 2% of men, and the other one had to do with the shape of his ears. That's all important later. Everyone who had examined him post-mortem said that his death was certainly not natural. His official cause of death was said to be heart failure with a strong suspicion of poisoning, but there was no sign of poison in his actual autopsy, so they couldn't confirm it. They checked his fingerprints, no matches. They then circled his photo everywhere, and nobody claimed him. Police had a few responses, so people did come and view the body, but no one ever recognized him. Nothing would happen for another 6 weeks. A suitcase was found at the train station where he had bought the unused ticket. Now, you're probably wondering how they connected this suitcase to the Somerton Man. So, first of all the clothes in this suitcase had their tags removed. And some of these clothes were mended with orange thread. Some of the clothes that the Somerton Man was wearing was also mended with the exact same orange thread. So they were basically able to 100% say that that suitcase belonged to him. Then a huge piece of evidence was found in May. They found a hidden pocket in his trousers. And in this secret pocket, there was a tiny rolled up piece of paper. This piece of paper had been ripped out of a book and it had the words Tamon Shud. I've probably butchered that. It's Persian and it translates to, "It is the end." This piece of paper had been ripped out from a very, very old book. I'm going to try not to butcher this, but it was called The Rubaiyat of Omar Khayyam. How'd I do? The police were out on the search to find the exact book that this had been ripped out of. And they did find the book, more like the book found them. A man walked into the police station with that exact book with the piece ripped out, claiming that somebody else put it in his car. I've run out of time, but you have to come back for part 2.
Would you buy a house where someone had been brutally murdered? If you watch true crime, you may know of the case of the Watts family homicide. In August 2018, a property became a crime scene when Chris Watts callously strangled his pregnant wife, Shanann Watts. She was killed inside their home, and he then went on to kill their 2 beautiful children. These were Bella, who was 4, and Celeste, who was 3. Now the home where this horrific tragedy took place is up for sale. The gorgeous home is online for $775,000. The house, located in Colorado, has 5 bedrooms and 4 bathrooms. The property includes stunning views of the Rocky Mountains. In 2013, the family bought the home for just under $400,000. It stood empty after the murders for almost 4 years. Another Colorado murder home was also placed up for sale last year. This was the JonBenet Ramsey murder house. The beautiful home became a horrific crime scene when 6-year-old JonBenet Ramsey was found deceased in the basement on Christmas 1996. The house was listed for sale last year for almost $7 million. It includes 5 bedrooms and 8 bathrooms. Interestingly, the official address of the property was changed back in 2001 and privacy gates were installed. I'm so interested in hearing whether you guys would live in a crime scene home.
What would you do if you saw a man parade in the streets holding a decapitated head, claiming that he was God? I'm True Crime Caitlin, and this is the murder of Jennifer Mills Westley. Jennifer was a 60-year-old woman enjoying her retirement in sunny Tenerife. Originally from Norwich, she was a mother of 2, and she and her daughters were best friends, and she was the best nana to her 5 grandchildren. Jennifer would be described as a vibrant woman. She was bubbly, she was full of life, and she was the type of person who would do anything for anyone. She worked for Norwich Council for 15 years in the road safety sector, and as part of her job, she would go into primary schools and educate the young children about road safety, and the children all gravitated towards her. Jennifer was very calm and warm by nature. After her retirement, being the sun lover that she was, she decided to up and move to Tenerife, and this was in 2006. On the 13th of May 2011, Jennifer jumped out of bed with excitement because today was finally the day that her daughter was coming to visit, and Jennifer couldn't wait. She was up and out early, heading to the shops to pick up a couple of last minute bits. But while she was out, she would get an uneasy feeling. Realising that a man had been following her, Jennifer dipped into an employment centre and relayed her concern onto a security guard who shooed the man away. Jennifer stayed behind for a couple of minutes to make sure that this man was gone, and when she thought that he was, she headed back out of the building, going to a nearby supermarket. She had no idea that that man was still following her. It was around 10:30 a.m. when Jennifer is in a Chinese supermarket and she's strolling along the aisles, looking up and down the shelves, when out of nowhere, the man who had been following her lunged at her from behind. He was armed with 2 knives, one of them being 22 centimeters long, and he began to ferociously stab and slash Jennifer in the neck, and within seconds, he had completely decapitated her. This all happened so fast that Jennifer didn't even have time to react to what was happening. She had no time to try and escape or even defend herself. After decapitating Jennifer in broad daylight in a shop filled with people, this man picked up her head, ran outside of the street and began to parade it almost as if he was proud of what he had just done, all while shouting about being God on earth. A very brave security man would chase down, tackle and restrain this man up until the police arrived to arrest him. This man was 29-year-old Dejan Dejanov, a paranoid schizophrenic, homeless drug addict who at the time of the murder was wanted by police. Originally from Bulgaria, Dejan would sort of float from place to place and country to country, and he would pick up odd jobs as he went by, leaving devastation behind everywhere he went. While visiting his
in Wales in the early 2000s, his auntie would contact the police because she was so concerned about her nephew. He was claiming that he was God, that he was the Messiah, and that he had powers. He was paranoid, thinking that he was being stalked and that there was cameras watching him everywhere. He would be admitted to an NHS psychiatric unit where he stayed for only 18 days before being let out. He did do a second stint in the psych ward, and during his time here, he would be quoted saying, "I will have to murder someone to get deported back to Bulgaria." But despite showing no real signs of improvement with his mental health, and after making this statement, he was still allowed to leave the hospital. After this, he would make his way over to Tenerife. Very quickly after his arrival, Dayan would become a familiar face to Tenerife police. He was known for his violence and how erratic his behaviour could be, and quite quickly after his arrival, the Tenerife police would consider him a threat to the public. After smashing a rock in a complete stranger's face in a completely unprovoked attack, the Tenerife police would issue a warrant out for his arrest, and this was only days before he decapitated and murdered Jennifer. His trial began in 2013, and the defence tried to put forward Dayan's medical history and mental health issues as part of his defence, trying to claim that he had diminished responsibility. Despite these issues being very prominent, I believe that under Spanish law, they still held him fully accountable for the murder, and because of that, a jury would find him guilty of the murder of Jennifer Mills Westley. He would be ordered to spend 20 years within a psychiatric unit in Seville in Spain. When asked if he had any words to say or if he wanted to make a statement, he would say through an interpreter, quote, "I am the second reincarnation of Jesus Christ, and I will bring the fire of the Holy Spirit to bear against this court."
They celebrated their first wedding anniversary, and then he murdered her. Andrea and Sean Yarborough seemed like a lovely, normal couple with 4 children. They lived in Florida, and Andrea worked as a financial advisor. Sean was 46 and was working as a fireman. They'd been married for a year and had just celebrated their first wedding anniversary. However, it would be the last one they would ever celebrate. On the 13th of June, Andrea's mum had picked up her granddaughter from the pair's home. The child told her nan that her parents were inside the house still sleeping. Andrea's mum didn't think much of this at first until she failed to be able to get hold of the couple. She didn't hear from them from the entire day, and Sean also failed to turn up at work. She tried texting and calling and got no response. That's when she decided to call police and ask them to do a welfare check. Officers arrived at the property at around 9:20 p.m. They went into the house through the front door, which was strangely unlocked. They found a shell casing and blood on the floor. Blood was coming out of a closed bathroom door, and when they went into the bathroom, to their horror, they found 2 bodies. Both Sean and Andrea were lying on the floor deceased. They determined that Andrea had been killed first and the manner of death was homicide. They determined that Sean had died from self-unaliving. Both had passed away from gunshot wounds. A woman's body was found stuffed in a duffel bag, and the culprit was the last person anyone expected. When a woman's body was found stuffed in a duffel bag in Forest Park in New York City, police knew they were hunting for a dangerous murderer. It was the 16th of April 2022. Investigators identified the victim as 51-year-old Orsolya Gal. She was a local married mum of 2 who lived in a beautiful $2 million property. Officers began to unravel secrets that would stun the community. She'd been stabbed almost 60 times, so officers knew that this was a crime of passion. The crime was incredibly personal, and she tried to fight back and had defensive wounds on her hands and fingers. Police noticed drag marks and blood droppings. They determined that the bag with her body inside had been dragged from one location to the other. Officers followed the bloody trail back to her house. Now, the woman, who was originally from Hungary, told her son that she was going out that evening. Her husband, Howard, and her other son, Jamie, were actually out of town in Oregon, looking for college options for him. She reportedly returned home that evening just after midnight. Investigators determined that her killer had turned up between the hours of 12:03 and 12:30 a.m. This was 44-year-old David Bonilla. The pair had been having an affair and was said to be on-off. He therefore knew that the spare key for the house was hidden in the barbecue in the garden. They apparently got into a heated argument when he decided to stab her. Police scoured the area for CCTV and saw this haunting clip. It shows a figure dragging the duffel bag down the road. Now, this was at around 4:30 a.m. David was charged with murder but pleaded guilty to first-degree manslaughter. He was therefore given just 25 years in prison.
The disappearance of 19-year-old Brandon Swanson is as bizarre as they come. He's on the phone with his father, and then he just screams, "Oh, shit," and then was never seen or heard from ever again. For me personally, when it comes to true crime, this is one of the most confusing unsolved mysteries. The day that 19-year-old Brandon Swanson vanished was supposed to be carefree and fun. It was May 13th, 2008, and it was the last day of Brandon's college semester. And to celebrate the end of the semester, Brandon met up with friends at 2 different parties that night. And everyone that interacted with Brandon that night said that he was drinking, but he wasn't drinking much and was definitely not drunk. But unfortunately, our only source of this was drunk college students, so we cannot be sure. Brandon left the last party of the evening alone around midnight to head back to his parents' house. But Brandon chose not to drive on the highway that would have been a faster straight shot back to his parents' house. No, Brandon chose to take the country back roads that he was not familiar with at all, likely to avoid cops, because Brandon was drinking and was drinking underage. The year was 2008, so the days before modern cell phones when everyone has a GPS in their pocket. But Brandon believed that he knew where he was going despite never using these back roads before. But unfortunately, while driving on these back roads, Brandon drove into a ditch and was unable to drive back out of it. He tries calling his friends multiple times to come help him, but none of them answered. So around 1 a.m., reluctantly, Brandon calls his parents for help and to come pick him up. Brandon told his parents that he was stuck on the back roads of Lind, Minnesota, which would have been about a 15-minute drive for his parents to come meet and pick him up. His parents start circling the back roads of this area where their son said that he believed that he was, but they could not find him. They start honking their horns so he could hopefully hear them. They're flashing their lights. Brandon is also flashing his car's lights, so one of them can hopefully see each other, but they don't see each other. Brandon starts to get frustrated after a while because it's a long time of them doing this, his parents circling and not finding him. So Brandon tells his father on the phone that he's going to get out of the car and start walking towards the town of Lind and that he will meet his father there, since he believes that he can see the town lights of Lind in the distance. Brandon is still on the phone with his dad and he's walking on the back roads, but eventually he tells his dad that he's going to cut through the fields because it seems like it'd be more of a shortcut. They've been on the phone for a while. It's around 3 a.m. now. Brandon tells his dad multiple things on the phone. He tells him that he can hear running water, that fences keep getting in his way, cutting off his path, but all seems normal until Brandon just screams, "Oh, shit." And then he hears nothing. The phone doesn't cut out, but he can't hear his son anymore. He can't hear anything anymore. He keeps calling his son's name out on the phone, but he hears nothing. He tries hanging up and calling back, and the phone rings, but his son never picks up. Brandon's parents continued to drive around for a while in the city of Lind, hopefully to try and find their son, but there's no signs. So around 6 a.m., so about 3 hours after Brandon screamed "oh shit" on the phone, they go to try and report him missing, but unfortunately, law enforcement was not helpful. They pretty much told his parents something along the lines of, it's not unheard of for a college boy to stay out all night and not pick up his parents' phone call. But I assume that they told him the situation, and that's pretty unheard of. He's walking around alone at night, screams "oh shit," and then nothing. Brandon's mother actually says that one of the officers told her that it was Brandon's right to go missing. What the frick does that even mean? Eventually, later in the day, officers do start helping in the search, and it was quite a while later. It was about 12 hours later, but once they did start searching, they searched extensively. They began searching the area of Lind where Brandon thought that he was, but even in the daylight, there's no signs of Brandon or his car. So they actually go ahead and they get a hold of Brandon's phone records, and it turns out that while Brandon was on the phone with his parents, Brandon was nowhere near where he thought he was. He was actually about 30 miles away from where he thought he was. So they do an extensive search of that area, and finally they find Brandon's car. There's no damage to the car. There's no signs of foul play. There's no blood in the car suggesting that maybe Brandon got injured while driving into the ditch. Brandon's car keys are gone. But what they do find, and I find very odd, is that Brandon left his glasses in the car. And why this is so strange is that Brandon was actually legally blind in one eye and could barely see without his glasses. And this is so weird because why would would Brandon leave his glasses that he could barely see without around 2 a.m. on these country back roads where it would have been about pitch black outside, so already hard enough to see, so why would he not bring his glasses with him? Law enforcement continued to thoroughly, extensively search the area, about 120 plus square miles of area. They have hundreds of volunteers. They have bloodhounds to try and smell Brandon's scent. They have cadaver dogs to try and smell maybe his body. They even have helicopters overhead searching for any sign of Brandon, but there was barely no sign of him. They never found Brandon. They never found Brandon's body. They never found his clothes. They never found his car keys, and they never found his cell phone to this day. And at the place where Brandon went missing, there was a lot of fields and farmlands, but at this time, the crops would not have been very tall. So if Brandon was still walking around or maybe had fallen over, was laying in the field somewhere, they would have found him. But they didn't. Actually, the only sign of Brandon came from one of the bloodhound dogs that believed that it was following Brandon's scent and followed Brandon's scent all the way to a nearby river. Now remember, when Brandon was on the phone with his dad, he said that he heard running water. Is it possible that when Brandon screamed, "Oh shit," he had fallen into the river and unfortunately drowned? Well, authorities think that that's actually very unlikely. Although a body of water where the bloodhounds alerted to Brandon's scent is called a river, the locals say it's a lot more like a creek because it's not very deep or very wide for most of it. Also, very quickly after Brandon disappeared, they put grates up at the end of the river to catch anything that was flowing by, and they never found anything of Brandon or found Brandon. Also, reportedly, during some times of the year, the river is mostly dried, and after this happened, they did extensive searches and again never found Brandon or any of his belongings. Also, the same dog that tracked Brandon's scent to the river tracked it coming out the other side, continue walking for quite some time before going cold. So if you are someone that believes scent tracking dogs, it is likely that Brandon went into the river, but then he also went out the other side. Brandon disappeared in early spring in Minnesota in the middle of the night. Temperatures were cold. It was about 30 degrees or lower that night. So if Brandon was now wet, it's possible that he could have succumbed to the injuries, maybe pass away from hypothermia. But if that's true and it's possible, why did they never find him? There has been many theories over the years about what could have happened to Brandon Swanson. Was he possibly shot by a farmer who saw him walking on his land? Could he have possibly been a victim of a hit and run? Or could he have just run off to start a new life? People just don't disappear into thin air. I was researching this case for so long that my mind actually started to drift into the world of like Twilight Zone possibilities. About a year after Brandon disappeared, his parents were able to pass Brandon's Law, which is a law in Minnesota that now, no matter how old someone is, how long they've been missing, if they're reported missing, authorities have to start immediately. Because his parents do believe that if they would have started searching when they tried to report him missing at 6 a.m., which would have been 3 hours after he last screamed, "Oh shit," that they could have possibly found him, gotten the family closure, or even have saved his life. And although Brandon's parents no longer believe that he's likely still alive, they still do keep the porch lights on every single night to this day, just in case he comes home. And if Brandon was still alive, he would be 34 years old. At the time that he disappeared, he was 5'5", about 120 pounds. He had brown curly hair and blue eyes. Now I'm going to try and explain my opinions on this case, and these are just my opinions. I mean, absolutely no disrespect to Brandon or Brandon's family, but I do believe that it is very likely that Brandon was more intoxicated the night that he disappeared than anyone else thought he was. To me, this would explain why Brandon did not know where he was, why he was 30 miles away from where he thought he was. It'd be really easy to get disoriented, get lost. Also why his car even ended up in the ditch in the first place, and also why he left his glasses in the car. I could not imagine why, as a sober person or close to sober, he would leave his glasses in the car. Other than that, I honestly have no idea what I think happened to Brandon Swanson. I don't think personally that he's still alive, unfortunately, but I have no idea if I think it's foul play or a tragic accident, which is why we cannot find Brandon Swanson. But there is about 1 million of you that do follow me, so I'm really interested to get your guys' take. You guys are always coming up with things I would never ever think of, so definitely leave all your theories, all your questions in the comments, and while you're there, please let me know what case you want to see me cover next. I love you guys so much, and I will see you guys tomorrow with another case.
I don't get sick easily, but even I felt extremely ill listening to this, so if you want to listen to it, feel free, but
Don't say I didn't warn you. Austin, I believe you pronounce his last name Haruf, was a college frat student that committed a crime that honestly, I don't even know what word to use to describe. This was in Florida in 2016. Austin's dad was more of the strict parent. His mom was more chill. He had a younger sister named Haley. His parents got divorced when he was a teenager, and him and Haley moved in with his mom. In middle school, he was your pretty average kid. He was a good student, got good grades, but he did get bullied a lot for his weight. In high school, he got really obsessed with his appearance, and he got really into health and fitness and also joined the football team. After high school, he went to Florida State University. He joined a frat, Alpha Delta Phi. He studied exercise science. He was your typical college boy. He drank a lot, maybe too much. He would party a lot, always out on a regular basis. Yeah, not much to say. He was just having fun his freshman year. He met a girl who became his girlfriend, had a good group of friends, had a fun time. It was the summer after his freshman year of college where things started to go wrong. After his freshman year, he decided he wanted to sober up. He did not want to be anywhere near anything that may be harmful to his body. He was going to eat clean, work out, take care of himself, and be better, in his own words. That summer, he also got really into music and rapping. He wanted to become a famous rapper. He was very passionate about it and started referring to himself as Austy Frosty. He got a job working for his dad. His dad was a dentist, and his attitude while working there was questionable. He got way too involved in his clients' personal lives. He would ask them questions almost to the point where it would make them uncomfortable and would get really attached and really involved in their personal lives and their problems. Still in the summer of 2016, he went to Tampa to go visit his girlfriend, and after he returned from the visit is when his entire personality changed. His parents said he came back from that trip as an entirely different person. All of his viewpoints on anything and everything had changed. Austin said he was evolving into this different person who had found his mission and his passion for life, and that was going to be to help people. He said he would be remembered as this great figure who did incredible things. He was never going to be sad anymore, and he found his purpose, which is great, but it was the way that he would talk about these things that made them weird. He would text his girlfriend telling her about this new person that he was going to be, and he would say things such as, "I'm sorry you think I'm so strange now. I've been so weird these past few days. I don't think I'm going crazy, but I am no longer afraid of anything." Little comments like that just made the whole thing sound off. This change of character progressed to the point where Austin started to believe that he was Jesus. He thought that he could bless water and make it holy. He started dressing like Jesus, and he even said that he was scared of the devil. He thought there were demons living around them everywhere, and he would see these dark figures and get really scared that they were going to kill him and or his family, and he was going to protect them from these scary demons. At the same time that he was believing that he was Jesus and he was scared of the devil, he was also believing that he was part human, part dog. Different days, he would think that he was part human, part horse. Yes, horse, like the animal. The way that his character and his personality was changing at such a rapid pace, to me, is a sign that he was struggling mentally. And his Google searches support that as well. He was Googling things such as ways to overcome fear and anxiety, selling your soul to the devil, how to know if you are going crazy. I think I am going crazy, am I? And then he would research things such as schizophrenia, depression, anxiety, panic, and bipolar disorder. So obviously something very weird and confusing is going on inside of his brain, and by his Google searches, it's obvious that he was confused by that as well. On top of that, he wasn't sleeping. He was averaging 2 hours a night on a good night of sleep. August 13, he goes out to dinner with his father and his father's girlfriend, and his dad says that night he was acting very frazzled, very confused, and almost on edge, all over the place, anxious, switching from being in a great mood, thinking that he was this powerful guy, to then being really scared and terrified of everyone around him. August 14th, he goes to a weapon show with his dad. It's very obvious that he's scared of something, but we don't really know what he was scared of. He was asking the people that were selling weapons there about self-defense and how to protect himself, and he did end up buying a knife at that show. The next day, August 15th, 2016, is the day of the crime. I'm going to be talking about the day and what he did during that day. It's going to sound crazy. It's kind of all over the place, but I'm going to try and make it easy to follow. That morning, he went on a run, which in itself is not weird. However, he was in the mood where he thought he was part dog during his run, so he started running on all fours. In the afternoon, he goes to his dad's house to pick up his car that he had left there. His dad notices that he's acting really strange, so he doesn't want to give him his keys, but Austin just goes crazy. He jumps on top of the car and starts jumping up and down, creating a scene until his dad eventually does give him his keys. One of his fraternity brothers was having a party, so he stops by by there that night. He doesn't want to drink because remember, he's taking good care of his body now, but he takes a beer and pours it all over him because he says that he has to feed his hand beer. Later on, he goes to dinner again with his dad. He is acting very weird and just runs out of the restaurant because he says that he feels trapped. He then ends up back at his mom's house where he lives, and mom is immediately concerned. He eventually ends up back outside and is just running around the streets. He's running around and he sees a dark figure that in his eyes is a demon, and he starts running around looking for help. And so he runs into the house of John and Michelle Stevens. John was 59. He owned a landscaping company, and Michelle was 53. She worked in finance. They were retired by this point. John and Michelle were described by their friends and family as very friendly, very kind, just genuinely nice people. Austin sees them sitting in the garage watching TV. The lights are on, so he runs over toward them. You have this 19-year-old boy screaming in a panic, very visibly unstable, running towards you. Obviously, that would cause anyone to freak out, so Michelle starts screaming because she doesn't know what's going on. Austin sees Michelle freaking out, and in his head, he now thinks that she is evil, and he's now scared of her. Austin pulls out the knife that he had bought at that show and starts stabbing both Michelle and John. He then grabs a machete from the garage and starts stabbing them further. While he's doing that, he finds a bottle of bleach in the garage and he just takes that and starts chugging it. Next to Michelle and John lived a man named Jeff Fisher. He hears the commotion, so he walks outside and into the garage to see what's going on. Austin attacks him and is now stabbing him. Jeff is somehow luckily able to run away and get back into his house. He calls 911, lets them know that he has been stabbed in the head and in the back. He's bleeding profusely, and there's a guy stabbing a woman and a man inside of their garage. Around that same time, Austin's mom calls 911 and says that she is worried. She doesn't know where her son is, but she is scared of his safety because he had been acting weird. The police show up to Michelle and John's house, and if you're eating, brace yourselves for this. Maybe stop eating for a second. Austin is hovering on the ground over John's body. He's making animal noises. He's practically naked and still stabbing them. That's not the worst part. The worst part is that Austin is hovering over John, biting his face and eating it. The cops can hear the sound of flesh ripping because Austin is chewing off John's face and eating it. The cops could not get Austin off of John. They tried a taser, it wasn't working. They sent a police dog to get him off, it wasn't working. Eventually, I'm not sure how long it took, but it took 4 policemen and the dog to get Austin eventually off of John. Once he's in handcuffs, he says to the police, "Help me, I've eaten something bad." The cops say, "What did you eat?" And he just responded and said, "Humans." John and Michelle were pronounced at the scene. Luckily, the neighbor Jeff was okay. He had horrible injuries, but he did live. Austin was taken to the hospital because he had a lot of injuries. He did have human flesh in his teeth, but he also had cuts all over him. His tongue was cut open and had pretty bad internal injuries because he had chugged that bottle of bleach. When he was taken to the hospital, they thought that he was under the influence of something, but they tested him and there was nothing in his system. He was diagnosed with bipolar disorder with psychotic features. 2 months after that, he was charged with the murders of Michelle and John and the attempted murder of Jeff. Everyone around him was concerned for him because his character just changed completely and he was acting so strange. They did schedule him a therapy appointment, but that appointment was not scheduled until after the attack and it was obviously way too late. Austin remembers bits and pieces of the attack, but he pretty much blacked out and his mental state was just completely destroyed. The trial was delayed because of the pandemic, but the judge accepted a plea deal. He was found not guilty by reason of insanity. There was an agreement between the prosecution and the defense for Austin to be sent to a secure mental hospital until doctors and a judge agreed that he was no longer dangerous. But the last update I could find was from last year. He's still in the facility for an indefinite period of time. I'm pretty sure he's still there and hopefully there's been some progress or something has been done. I don't know. I just can't imagine ending the lives of 2 people, eating their flesh, and then being able to repair your mental state to be normal again. I don't know. The brain is such an interesting thing, and it's crazy to me that we all have brains, but they all can be wired so differently, and psychotic breakdowns and mental breakdowns are so interesting, like the science behind that. Let me know what you think. I have no words. So I'm gonna exit now, but I will be in the comments, and I love you all.
This is one of the very few times where someone under the age of 18 was put on death row. Sean Sellers was the first and only person executed for crimes that he committed when he was under the age of 17 after the reinstatement of the death penalty in the 1970s. This is a very controversial case. It sparked debates for decades, and I'm so interested to get your guys' opinions on it. Sean was born May 18th, 1969. His mother, Vonda, was only 16 years old when he was born, and his biological father was an unstable addict and a serial cheater. Sean was only a toddler when his biological father was no longer in the picture, and soon later, his mother married his stepdad, a trucker named Lee. Sean's stepfather was the only father he ever knew, but he was on the road for work a lot, and then his mother would go on the road with her new husband for weeks at a time, leaving her small son with family members or babysitters. Sean's parents also moved a lot for work, so by the time that Sean was 16 years old, he had moved 30 different times, and Sean would get little to no warning before a move. So Sean was alone a lot as a child. He definitely had a fear of abandonment. He also felt like he had no control over his life. He was always the weird new kid at school, and he never made any friends because what would be the point? And to make all of that worse, Sean also reportedly started hearing voices in his head by the time he was 6 years old. These voices would shout at him, criticize him, and his parents were never around long enough to see the damage that their absence was causing their son. Sean definitely was experiencing trauma, and you can tell this because he actually wet the bed into his early teen years. If he was staying with his uncle would make him wear a diaper to bed, and then if he soiled the diaper in the middle of the night, like he had an accident, his uncle would force him to wear the soiled diaper on his head to shame him. When Sean was little, his mom thought that he was the perfect child, but as he got older, she actually began to physically, verbally, and emotionally abuse him. Sean's stepdad thought that he was weak, so he actually forced him when he was 10 years old to go deer hunting with him to kind of man him up. And his stepdad thought that he was weak because he did not want to hurt these animals, but he would force him to do it anyways. And then afterwards, he would force Sean to do really disgusting things to the animals. At a very young age, Sean got interested in the occult, black magic, and Satanism. He thought that through Satanism, it would give him the power to control his life and also control others. But as he got more obsessed with these things, the voices in his head got worse. The voices would tell him really dark things and tell Sean to do terrible things. Before this, Sean was on the honor roll. He did sports. He was like any other teenage boy, but then his entire personality changed. He actually tried to tell his mom about these disturbing thoughts and the voices he was hearing, but allegedly his mom kind of just dismissed him. Sean also tried to tell 2 different teachers at school about these disturbing thoughts, but they didn't seem concerned either. And Sean also wrote an essay at school where he said that he thought he could kill someone and not feel any remorse afterwards. So Sean went to his best friend, Richard Howard, and told him about these dark, disturbing thoughts and feelings he was having. And his friend Richard actually told him that he also had dark fantasies. And this wasn't something that Sean should feel embarrassed about. This was actually really cool. So Sean, at only 16, has tried to tell 3 different adults about these disturbing thoughts he was having, and they all dismissed him. And then he told his best friend that he was having these disturbing thoughts, and his friend told him to embrace them. I'd imagine this would be really confusing. Sean also later stated that his friend Richard was more evil than him, and they would spend a lot of time together talking about all these disturbing dark fantasies and also doing satanic rituals. And then one day, Richard tells Sean that he hates his girlfriend's father and he wanted to kill him, and asked if Sean would help him, and Sean agreed. And then Richard said that he would only kill his girlfriend's father if Sean killed someone first, so they were both even, and Sean agreed. There was this one gas station in town, and Richard and Sean would go to this gas station a lot at night to buy snacks. There was always the same man working the midnight shift at the gas station, and that man was 32-year-old Robert Bauer. Since Sean and Richard were there so often, they kind of got cool with the guy. They were friendly. So one night the boys tried to buy beer even though they were only 16, and Robert denied them. And I guess this was enough for Robert to be Sean's victim, his human sacrifice. So on the evening of September 8th, 1985, Sean and Richard went to the Circle K gas station with Richard's grandfather's firearm. They actually spoke with Robert for a while they pretended to buy snacks like nothing was wrong. And then when there was no one else in the store, Sean fired at Robert multiple times while Richard blocked the exit. And then they ran out of the gas station, they sped away in their truck laughing, and for whatever reason, they decided against killing Richard's girlfriend's dad that evening. The gas station unfortunately had no security cameras, there were no leads, there was no evidence, there was no motive because nothing was stolen, so unfortunately the case went cold. And after this, Sean felt more confident. He thought that he had pleased the devil and the devil had given him power. He started a really serious relationship with a 15-year-old girl named Angel. It's honestly pretty ironic, a kid obsessed with the devil dating a girl named Angel. Angel was a troubled teen. She was seen as a bad girl, so Sean's mother did not approve of the relationship. She tried to ban Sean from seeing Angel and would say like a lot of mean things about her and call her a lot of mean names. Sean's mother, Vonda, wrote her son a 6-page letter telling him how much she loved him, how worried and concerned she was for him. But at that point, Sean only saw his mother as an obstacle and really resented her. So on the evening of March 5th, 1986, after doing one of his rituals, Sean, only 16 years old, shot his stepfather and his mother while they were asleep in bed. Sean then tried to stage the house like an intruder had broken in. He then went to his best friend Richard's house and confessed what he had just done to his parents. The next morning, both of them went back to Sean's house where Sean pretended to find his parents' bodies and then hysterically ran to his neighbor's house where his neighbor called the police. When investigators got there, they were almost immediately suspicious of Sean. They said that he wasn't acting right. Also, the scene looked obviously staged. I mean, nothing was stolen. So they brought Sean and Richard into questioning. Almost immediately, Richard told them everything. So Sean confessed to all 3 murders. During Sean's trial, his best friend Richard actually testified against him in a plea deal so he wouldn't also be charged with murder. And Sean's defense tried to blame his mental health and also the fact that he was into Satanism. Something I find really odd is apparently the jury wasn't made aware that Sean was only 16 at the time of the murders, and also apparently in Oklahoma at the time, life without the possibility of parole wasn't an option. So when it came to sentencing Sean, it was either sentence him to life with the possibility of parole in 15 years or the death penalty. So Sean Sellers was sentenced to death row at the age of 17 years old for the crimes he committed when he was 16. He is one of 22 people to be sentenced to the death penalty for crimes committed before the age of 18, and he's the first and only person to ever be sentenced to the death penalty for crimes committed before the age of 17 after the reinstatement of the death penalty in 1976. So this was obviously really controversial, and no one really knew how to feel about it. Behind bars, Sean converted to Christianity. He showed a lot of remorse. He did a lot of interviews, including with Oprah. He tried to appeal his sentence multiple times, but was ultimately executed on February 4th, 1999. And then about 6 years after Sean's execution, the Supreme Court actually ruled that it was unconstitutional to execute people for crimes they committed under the age of 18. I find this case so fascinating. I'm so interested to get your guys' opinions on it. I think there's going to be a lot of interesting discussion in the comment section. Do you think this was unconstitutional? Do you think that they made the right choice and he deserved the death penalty for the crimes that he did commit? Let me know all your thoughts in the comments. While you're there, please let me know what case you want to see me cover next. Until then, I love you guys so much, and I will see you guys tomorrow with another video.
This boy just showed up on his mom's doorstep 15 years after he went missing. This is one of the most twisted and strange disappearance cases you'll probably ever hear. Hi, Meg, I talk about true crime. Let's get into the case of Johnny Gosch. March 1997 at 2 a.m., Noreen Gosch hears a knock at her front door. Noreen had not slept properly since '82 when her son went missing at 12 years old, but that hope always remained that he would return, and so she answered. She opened the door, and standing in front of her was 2 men in their late 20s. The moment she made eye contact with one of the men, she knew this was her missing son, Johnny. She sat down with the 2 boys inside, and the dynamic was really strange. The boy claimed to be Johnny, but every time he went to answer a question, he would turn to the man with him as if asking for his permission to speak. They had a short discussion, and then Johnny told Noreen to never speak of that moment to anyone, claiming that if anyone found out that he visited his mother, he could be in danger. To better understand this story, we have to return to the day Johnny went missing, September 1982, on a Sunday morning. 12-year-old Johnny lived in a happy family, and he was a paper boy. And he would usually do the rounds with his dad at around 5:45 every single morning. But this morning, he decided that he wanted to have a little bit more independence, so he just went with the dog. As he started his paper route, he had no idea that in the coming weeks, he would be the cover of all those papers. Because later that morning, Johnny was taken. A woman who received the newspaper usually called Johnny's father, claiming that she never received her newspaper. Johnny's father immediately set off looking for him. And instead of finding Johnny, he found his wagon that was still full of newspaper and rubber bands were scattered on the ground. Weirdly enough, Johnny's father actually finished the paper round. I don't really know why, but he did. He took the wagon and he finished delivering all the papers. You're probably wondering, where was the dog? The dog actually found its way home on its own. That's when it kind of hit Noreen and she decided to call the police. I forgot to mention this takes place in Iowa, and back in the 80s, you could not report someone missing until 72 hours unseen. Now we know that if a child isn't found in the first 24 hours, the chances of them actually being alive drop drastically. A man called Rossi was one of the last people to see Johnny alive. He claimed to have seen 12-year-old Johnny talking to a man in his car. And when he asked Johnny, what was that man talking to you about? Johnny was like, oh, he just wanted some directions. And as Johnny walked away from this unknown man's car, the man in the car flashed his overhead light 3 times as if it was some sort of signal. And then the guy drove off, so that could have been the kidnapper. 2 paper boys also came forward saying that a man seemed to have been following Johnny. Once again, there wasn't really a good description of the man. It was very generic. His mother, Noreen, watched as so much time went by and nothing was being done. The police didn't seem to really care about this case, and so she decided to hire some private investigators instead. Real quick, I got hundreds of messages from you guys saying that you got this and you really enjoyed this blush, and just letting you know, it's back on for £5, so if you click that link, you can buy it there. It's seriously amazing. 2 years after Johnny went missing, another paper boy actually went missing as well. And when I say the circumstances were identical, they were identical. He was seen talking to a strange man, and then he vanished without trace. And as well, it was in the exact same area where Johnny had been taken. Weirdly enough, one of the private investigators actually guessed that this would happen. 2 years after that, yet another 13-year-old boy goes missing, same circumstances, but he was not a paper boy. And unfortunately, this is the only time that it started really being seen as a serious thing, but people really took advantage of the Gosh family. People would get in contact with Noreen claiming to have her son, and they would ask for money and things like that. And she was so desperate, as you would be, it's her son, and she would send the money, and they wouldn't have her son, and it was a scam. It's honestly just vile that people do that, take advantage of a grieving family who have just lost their child. An inmate in a prison claimed to have helped the kidnapper kidnap Johnny. This inmate's name was Paul, and he had a lot of information that he couldn't have possibly known. He claimed that he was taken into trafficking himself and then made to abduct Johnny, which is actually a very common occurrence in trafficking. Trafficking victims become traffickers. Well, because they have to. They're molded to become that. The information that he couldn't have possibly known were a birthmark on Johnny's tongue that was not public information. He also talked about certain mannerisms that Johnny had. Once again, something that was not public information. And Noreen, Johnny's mother, was convinced this guy knows what he's talking about. But the police once again were nah, this guy's just lying. He has nothing to do with it. And because they didn't really follow up on anything, the case basically went completely cold. There was never any trails to follow or anything. Trafficking back in the 80s was not seen as something that was real. People heard about it, but back then it was more of a conspiracy than fact. There were a few strange sightings that were nearly confirmed to be Johnny between it going cold and him showing up on the doorstep. But nothing really came of those either, because honestly, the police work seems pretty shit this whole case. So yeah, fast forward to 1997 when Johnny shows up at Noreen's doorstep. Because he told her not to say anything, she actually stayed quiet for 2 years. She didn't tell a soul about this encounter. She also never saw him again. When Noreen finally broke her silence on what happened in 1997, Johnny's father, who was now her ex-husband, didn't really believe her. He thought that it was another one of those scams because They had really been screwed with people scamming them for money. Once again, who does that? But she had mother's intuition. She thought she knew that it was her son, but we will never know whether or not that was actually Johnny. We also don't know still where he is, what happened to him, anything, if he's even alive. Now, remember that inmate, Paul, that I spoke to you about, that said he claimed he knew what happened to Johnny? Because of him, a trial started in 1999 because he was trying to file a civil lawsuit against a man named Lawrence King. He was part of the Omaha Franklin Credit Union, and according to Paul, he forced Paul and other boys into sex trafficking when they were underage, so child trafficking. Lawrence King would end up going to jail for some sort of like embezzlement thing, but the whole trafficking thing itself was dropped. This somewhat proves that Paul could have been telling the truth about Johnny and how he went missing, because if he's willing to go to court about this trafficking incident, Lawrence King could have been the person responsible for Johnny's disappearance in the first place. But it was dropped, he was never taken seriously. Because of Johnny's disappearance, his mother Noreen made sure that this would never happen again. She helped create and pass the Johnny Gosch Bill, which makes it so police have to investigate missing children right away and not wait a stupid 72 hours first. She also helped establish the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. There's one last twist to this story, and it came 10 years after she last saw Johnny on her doorstep. September of 2006, Noreen walked onto her front porch to find a stack of photographs. In one of the photographs, there was a boy wearing the same outfit Johnny was wearing when he went missing. Alongside this boy, who looked very similar to Johnny, there were other boys in restraints. When she took this to police, they said that it wasn't Johnny, and they could prove it. They were able to identify some of the boys in the picture, but they were never ever able to identify the boy that Noreen believed to be Johnny. But they told her, it's just a trick. It's another one of them tricks that someone's trying to pull on you. It's not Johnny. You're being dumb. But she believed it to be Johnny. To this day, Noreen has no idea what came of her son, if he's still alive, or what's happened to him. But I'm sure that she's still hopeful that one day she will see her son again. This case is so twisted and messed up, and I don't really have anything to say. I hope that one day this can get resolved, but it's just so, I don't know, everything just seems shady. But that's everything for today's video. I hope that you found the story interesting, and let me know what case you want me to cover next. I'll see you in the next one. Bye!